so that others who know where we are going, what we're doing. Uh, the class actually officially ends on Thursday next week. But for the UNDP cohort, I have a special plan. I have discussed it with the UN representative. I will continue to work with you this time next week. I want to review what you have done, where you have stopped, where there are gaps. Because in your own particular case, Scalidi, you have done quite a bit of the work. Others have done, a little here and a little there, but not totally blank. So I'm prepared to work individually with everybody and continue until everybody's completed this so that you can get your certificate. Whenever you are done, you get your certificate, okay? But you do all the work. Recently I posted the requirement for the term paper. If you haven't got there yet, that's fine with me, okay? If you have not got there yet, that is perfectly fine with me. When I look at all the gaps for each individual person, then we try to fill in those gaps. This fourth week, we are, in the area where we are dealing with, global trade relations as a topic. And so, in fact, the emphasis has been on the World Trade Organization for the first part of it. There are three aspects of global trade relations. Let me just all right. There are three aspects of global trade relations. One is just the broad relationships in the way, like I said, the emphasis on Module 10 is on the WTO, how trade disputes are settled. There is the dispute settlement body, the DSB of the WTO. And, recently, for example, actually in 2022, which is not long ago, South Africa, raised a dispute, with the EU because the EU imposed, certain restrictions on the importation of citrus, as orange and related fruits from South Africa to the EU. And so such disputes are, settled, through the DSB of the United Nations. And the issue then was that, certain pesticides or, they impose certain kinds of qualities for the importation of fruit into the EU. Now, disputes arise because sometimes countries use requirements to make it difficult to import goods from other countries. For example, if you wanted to import automobiles into the United States, then you would have certain kinds of requirements on the vehicles. For example, the bumper stickers must have so much strength. Okay. But sometimes countries impose labor requirements, like labor standards, as a means of saying, for example, you cannot use slave labor to produce something and export it to, say, United States. They wouldn't agree with it. But even other labor conditions, for example, the sanitary conditions of factories, whether people work 12-hour days without overtime pay. In the United States, after 8 hours, somebody must get overtime. Okay, the requirement is that during the week, the overtime pay is 25% more than the regular pay. And then if it's weekend or holiday, then the overtime pay must be 50% on top of the regular pay, which is a requirement. Now, if you were trying to import, or export from your country, goods that you manufacture in your country, the United States would actually have their representatives, ensure that you pay overtime if people are working over the weekend, or if people work more than 8 hours during the weekday. They will, cite, they will look at the labor conditions, whether there is sanitation conditions, whether the working conditions are healthy. And if not, they will say, no, you cannot import. And the reason why sometimes is that, for example, you cannot use child labor to manufacture anything and import it into the United States. But also, they can also impose requirements on something like fruit, which is the dispute that South Africa was raising with the United EU in 2022. That was in July 2022. They raised that issue. There are certain restrictions that EU was imposing on South African fruit because they did not meet certain standards about, I think, what do they call that? Photos. Well, I'm not a technical person, so let me actually look up what they called it. Um, I call it phytosanitary requirement. Okay. Now,
Okay.
okay, I call it phytosanitary, which says it was about the health, the health conditions or the health issues related to the fruit. Um, okay. Now the question is the South African government essentially felt like either the restrictions, were unfair, or that they had met the requirements, and the EU is still insisted that the requirement was not met. But whatever it was, okay, those kinds of health requirements will be used to obstruct the importation of goods because one of the negotiations over the years, was about access. Uh, and if you think about the United Nations goals about development, the UN development goals for 2030, the whole idea is to promote trade so that everybody is able to efficiently produce what they can produce efficiently, to give access to markets to everybody. And
Yeah.
so, if you're going to achieve those UNCTAD goals, the SDG goals, uh, then free trade flow should be allowed. And so, when you begin to impose these conditions that are unfair, assuming that you can demonstrate that they are unfair, then you will not be able to achieve those SDGs for everybody. And the SDGs, I will say, um, is very, very important. Uh, but they are complex also. And I think about the complexity of the SDGs. Okay. Here's
Yeah.
a complexity in it. Let
Mm.
us say that one of the areas of the SDG is to make sure that income equality is achieved, not only within country but also across nations. And income equality can only be achieved if there's employment across nations. Okay. And there's also the question of everybody should be healthy. And so, if you were to say permit child labor in the extreme in some
Mhm.
countries so that they can export cheaply to other countries, then the SDG of providing education, because if children are working, they cannot go to school at the same time. Okay. Secondly, and then a lot of their childhood mental development, emotional development will be lost. Uh, uh,
Mm.
uh,
Okay.
And so, but then let us, look at the more subtle, issues like health conditions. Okay, we want everybody to be healthy,
So,
so that health
okay.
facilities are available across the world, so that people have good health. Okay. Now, but they also have sanitary conditions are good.
Conditions.
Water, water is not polluted, and so if you allow people to use technologies that pollute the rivers, then people will not have good water. But nevertheless, they can export cheaply to foreign countries. And so now, if they export goods that are produced under non-sanitary conditions or unsanitary conditions, under conditions where the environment is polluted, what happens then is that you fail to achieve one particular SDG because you want to give access to market.
Mm.
And so these are
But they will,
complications. Yeah. So you
but they will
contradict.
be impacted.
Oh yeah. So
Mm.
the SDG goals, and I'm not saying that the conflicts between the SDG goals are bad. No, in fact, they are good in a sense. What we are looking for at the end of the day is an optimal set of conditions, an optimization of the process. Okay, so and that is where issues of sustainability arises. Sustainability simply means that you want to achieve certain goals without jeopardizing others,
Oh,
without
yeah.
compromising in other areas,
Or the LGG.
of the SDG.
Yeah.
So this is something. This is an area where you look at global trade relations and the World Trade Organization, which was originally called GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. But the GATT did not include certain things that the WTO has included, okay, especially
Yeah.
agricultural products, when it included, and I think textiles is another area. So, one of the reasons why you have third world countries, negotiating so that they can have access is that technology over time has also made it possible for certain products to become more labor intensive. The technologies are available, for example, in the area of textiles. Okay, the
Mm.
area of textiles,
Yeah.
developing countries now that have cheaper labor, that also the technology for making textiles and textile products is now essentially more readily available than, say, the technology for making airplanes. Okay, the technology for making computers. Those are not readily available, and so in that regard, then the developing countries are able to export textiles. But you also have the fact that the developed countries can also produce textiles, even though their labor costs are much higher, which makes it, makes them less competitive in those areas. But they can produce the machinery quite more easily than developing countries. That is
Mm.
a fact. Okay.
Yeah.
And so over time, we try to achieve this sustainability, in which case we don't compromise one in order to achieve the other. And so at the end of the day, we're trying to essentially balance and optimize
Between.
and achieve optimal outcomes. Okay. The other area of global trade relations is, of course, we talk about trade unions. I mean, regionalism, where you have regional organizations that
Mm.
essentially, where countries between themselves, you have economic unions, you have customs unions, and so, for example, in customs unions, countries like neighboring countries can agree to lift all custom requirements, and so you don't charge tariffs among yourselves for goods.
Mm.
ECOWAS is an example that we all know. We try to allow free movement of not only labor but also of goods across certain countries, and so you have more like an attempt to achieve regional trade. I would say free flow of trade among countries, and free flow of goods across countries. You know, so that's another area. And then another issue in global trade relations is multinational corporations. Multinational corporations have broken boundaries, in the sense that you have a country, you have a company or a business, let me say a business entity in the United States that has branches across the world. Okay, they have manufacturing facilities across the world. And let's say Toyota. Okay, Toyota will have plants in Nigeria. They have plants in the United States. They have plants in Europe. They have plants in China, and then they are able to operate in those countries and try to comply with their laws. Okay, but then the issues have arisen about multinational corporations. For example, when they operate in Nigeria, do they have the same labor conditions as they would have? I say General Motors is one good example is let me take General Foods. Okay, they produce orange soda. They produce orange soda, the soft drink in the United States, or they produce orange juice in the United States. Do they produce the same quality of orange juice in Nigeria? Okay. Just a minute. Do they produce the same quality of orange juice in Nigeria, or even orange punch? The punch has a little spike of real fruit as opposed to orange, soda, the soft drink. And I visited Nigeria recently, and I saw what they called orange drink, which really purported to have the orange bottled orange juice. But just when I took a sip of it, and I did not buy it so that I could drink orange juice, because even here in the United States, you wouldn't see me buy orange juice in the market and drink, because of the sugar content. But I just wanted to have a sip of it and see if this is the same quality. And definitely it wasn't the same quality, just not the same thing. It was clear to me that one of the producers in Nigeria was highly spiked with sugar or some sugar equivalent or something that made it taste very sweet. But also, it tasted a little bit like it has some kind of toxic chemical in it. And maybe because when I drink the one here, I don't feel, it's much more refined. And so the toxic chemical that I kind of tasted in what I had in Nigeria, because I've become very sensitive to, to the chemistry of whatever I consume. And so, like I said, I didn't buy it so as to drink it. Nevertheless, even if I had bought it so I could drink it, I would not have continued to drink it because I just felt that it had much more toxic chemical than it should have. Okay, so many people have criticized multinational corporations and say they are just extensions of the exploitation of developing countries by advanced countries. Because very often they do not operate with the same labor conditions. They do not operate with the same, sanitary conditions, or they're just violations. Sometimes they involved in environmental violations. And over the years, one of the biggest issues with multinational corporations is their violations of the environment. Like dumping chemicals in rivers and what have you, and polluting the rivers and polluting the forests to make it difficult for even farmers to be able to farm, or for fisher people to be able to fish. And so a lot of issues have arisen. And in many ways, they polluted the environment. For numerous years, especially in the 1950s and 1960s, there were complaints about the aluminum company in Jamaica, where they have bauxite from which you produce aluminum. And there were a lot of issues about them polluting the environment and just making their profits and taking their profits away. The other thing is, do they reinvest their profits, some of their profits, in the host countries, so as to divest, their countries and expand employment in other ways. And very often that has been an issue. And this is why, for example, in the mid-1970s, the Nigerian government instituted the indigenization decree, the indigenization law. And the whole idea was to allow Nigerians to own substantial shares in foreign corporations operating in Nigeria. By so doing, the Nigerian owners will reinvest their profits inside Nigeria, rather than for the overseas companies to simply take the profits from the full capital and take it out. And that was an issue. So there are pros and cons. The advantages and disadvantages of having multinational corporations, especially from advanced countries into developing countries. So those are the three main topics of the week that is just passed. And so next week we will begin with other issues. So besides that, those are the summaries, and you can complete the discussions and the assignments. And like I said, wherever you stop, I will take it from there for everybody. And so next week we're going to do a review, not only of what is in week 5, but also in the other weeks. So whatever you stop, we'll
Thank you.
give you time, give you all the time,
Okay.
to complete everything, so that we can then go back. We can even go back to week 1 and discuss the issues there. We can go back to week 2 and discuss the issues there, and I'll do a summary lecture of what you have there.
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for me?
Yes. As far as the explanation is concerned, I feel everything is good for me. Now, the question I have is this. Last time I was asking question about how to locate the session recording, and you told me that it's always shared. But on the platform, all my attempts to locate them have failed.
No. The recordings I post on YouTube, and I send an email to everybody and provided a link.
Okay.
They are on YouTube, and I sent an email. Did you receive the email? Or
no,
maybe you didn't understand.
I haven't seen any email containing the YouTube link.
Oh, okay. No, I did send it. I posted an announcement in Brightspace, so that you can see the link there. But I'm going to send a special email to the United Nations cohort, so that you can look at it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Have a
Thanks
nice
a
day.
lot.
All right.
Yeah.
Then. I'll see you next week.
Okay. Thanks, Susan.
All right. Bye.